Welcome to the Everyday Board Game Podcast with Daniel.
And Daniel.
And today we are going to be talking about our weekly Chits and Giggles discussion topic. And our question that we had for the audience and a lot of the viewers, as well as ourselves, is what makes a Kickstarter one you want to back? Like, what factors have to go with a Kickstarter that make it unique or makes it, one that makes you go, oh, wow, I have to back this. So that's kind of our thing. There's a lot of variables that we could have with this. I myself have ran a Kickstarter. I've ran a few Kickstarters. I've also backed about 200 something Kickstarters now. Most of them are playing cards, but maybe about 50 board games or so.
Again, because you're a weirdo.
Either way. And Daniel, how many Kickstarters have you backed, or give or take?
Apparently not as much as you. I think I've done about 30, maybe 40.
Yeah,
around there.
I'm probably exaggerating, honestly. Maybe it's 20 or so. I don't tend to back Kickstarters as much.
Bit picky when it comes to board gaming backing.
Yeah.
We'll discuss why it's in my list. Why I'm so picky.
Yeah, exactly. And like a mutual friend of ours, he backs seemingly like every game. He gets games every week.
He doesn't have a wife to answer to, so
that's a good point. So that's a factor in our end, right? I mean, the fact that we're not married, but we have wives, and
yes,
and I have kids as well that eat money, so that makes it tricky.
That's because they like to eat, Danny.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they eat money, exactly. So we posed this question to the Facebook group Board Game Revolution forum. And on Facebook, so if you want to ever join in on the discussion, you can join in there or live here with our chat. And we asked them what factors make it something that you're excited to back, knowing that there's a lot of Kickstarter fans there. And I feel like this is important information for people to realize about themselves, because if you know what you want to back, then you're not going to have as much fear of missing out. So I know very well what I would likely back, and if I
this
see,
year I think I've backed 4 games. Yeah. I backed one recently for just $1 to keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
But for me, and the reason I did that is because I knew 2 for sure I'm backing. In fact, one of the ones I know for sure I'm backing hasn't even hit yet.
Yeah.
And that will hit next month. We've talked about it. The role player adventure game
should
be hitting next month. Kickstarter June 23rd, I believe.
Yeah.
That one for sure I'm backing. I backed Frosthaven. For me, it's knowing what's gonna happen and what's gonna go down the line is important too, because this way you don't have that FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think I'm not going to get into which games I've backed so far, but I think while I talk about my top 3 reasons and honorable mentions, I'm going to bring up some of the games that I have backed and why and how this is a factor in it.
Yeah.
So with that being said, let's talk about what our viewers have said. So our first one, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, Roberto said for him, it's price, theme, bonus content, and mechanics.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that that's a big selling point if it says right on the title, hey, worker placement?
And it's interesting. This is not in my honorable mentions or the top 3 reasons why I would back a Kickstarter, but price is important. Sometimes I will back big Kickstarters, Rising Sun being one of them, and pay the all-in package for it because it's a decent deal, especially when it comes to when you're backing command games. Their all-in deal tends to be one of the better ones because this way you don't have that fear of missing out. A story about that I can tell is a buddy of ours. He ended up getting Blood Rage after the fact for the Kickstarter. After the Kickstarter, he bought a base game and started playing it, enjoyed it, and he wanted to get everything for it. And to track down everything for it it's super expensive. So there's a few things he's still missing from it. And I know he recently backed the digital version Kickstarter to get some new stuff for it. So it's like...
Yeah, exactly. It's that... Because he missed out in his mind, I mean, wasn't so much
And
the fear of
that's
missing
that's
out.
also a detriment to Come On, is that they have all these Kickstarter exclusive that you
Right.
need to be on the Kickstarter to get. That's why I only have one of their major Kickstarter games.
We should definitely talk about Kickstarter exclusives later, um, and talk about if they are good or a bad topic, or if they are a good or a bad thing for the hobby. I will put that down right here as a note, and we'll bring that up later. Yeah, price is a big thing for me too. I mean, if there's just a reasonable amount of money that I just can
Yeah.
spend and can't spend. If it's a $400 game, there has to be a reason I'm backing it. I think the
Like for me, I'm a big Batman fan. You know this. A
Yeah.
lot of people know this. But they had a Batman Kickstarter just recently, about a year ago. And the all-in for both shipments for it was $400.
Yeah.
That was my car payment.
Right, exactly.
Actually, more than my car payment, half my rent payment. It's like, really? Come on.
Yeah. It wasn't Come On that made it, right? No, I agree. Like that, I very rarely pledge over $100 for a Kickstarter, and that's just because, and that's rare even if I do anything close to that.
Yeah.
I saw a recent poll by another member or another poll that was conducted where it said kind of like the sweet zone is about $80 for a game.
Yeah, no, I have no problem paying over. I'll just go ahead and mention it. I was in the $140 range for Frosthaven. I wanted to get the solo scenarios and some of the other stuff,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to pay the $180 or almost $200 for the broken token insert with it, and there was the metal coins that came with it. I mean, those are cool, and I ended up getting metal coins later on through the backer kit, but I didn't want to pay it at the time, because the thing for me is like, if there's really something that I want to get, I'll wait for the pledge manager,
Right.
because I'll have the funds then just to pick up the little extra stuff that I want to pick up.
Right, exactly. Kavan said, number 1, a creator or publisher with games that I love. Number 2, theme. 3, art and production. And 4, mechanics. Sounds like they should join in on a top 8 debate. No, I completely agree. Like, their number 1 factor being a publisher or creator that they already know that they're games that you want. I mean, like, let's say Queen Games. Queen does a lot of Kickstarters. If you like their style of Euros, which are fairly straightforward, simple Euros, family weight level, then those are almost a shoe-in, right? Where like level 99, they definitely have a market on how they do their Kickstarters, and a certain reputation that they already have built because of how well they've fulfilled all their Kickstarters. So I don't disagree with that. How do you feel a creator or publisher has a big factor in yours?
We'll talk about that later.
Okay, cool. As will I.
All right, so kit adds theme, mechanics, production value, getting I don't know what, or I guess
getting best friend
getting a good discount rule book, and preferably tabletop simulator or tabletopia mods. Early bird discounts annoy me, and I don't care about Kickstarter exclusives and artificial stretch goals.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, that's interesting, Kit. That's a good thing to bring up, is how much do Kickstarter exclusives really help?
Yeah.
And I know I've brought up Level 99 before, but they are running a Kickstarter right now called Bullet, and they are, at the time of the recording, maybe when it's published, we'll also have it out. It'll still be going as well. But this is their first Kickstarter where they are doing no upgrades, no stretch goals, I don't think Kickstarter exclusives technically. There is.
They are doing a kind of an upgrade in a sense, was that you can get 2 forms of the game. You can get the base game that you'll find in stores and stuff like that, and then you can get the deluxe edition where the bullets, I think it's what it is, are wood rather than plastic or cardboard. I can't remember exactly what.
Yeah, it's rather than punchboard. Yeah. So I mean, that's right. That is one upgrade, but that's it. They've already said that they're not doing stretch goals. They're not doing that. They did have an early bird though. If you're like one of the first backers in the first day or two, you get a poster with it too. But that's interesting. I like how he brings up the discount. Like knowing that it's going to go into retail, does that have a factor in yours, or is that something we'll talk about later?
It's not on my list, but it does help. Basically saying I can get it this, and then if there's stretch goals, I can get the stretch goals to go with it. To me, the stretch goals that I like in a Kickstarter, and it's not on my list either, is the fact that this is something that's going to go into the base game. We just need a certain amount of money to get to it. So whether it's new scenarios or something like that, that's something that makes it for, like, I'm okay with helping other people getting the same things.
Sure.
The Kickstarter exclusive minis and stuff like that Command does. That's the only reason why I went on to Rising Sun, is because I wanted to get everything while I had it, and I enjoy Rising Sun.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like if I know the game is going to go into retail, that's almost a definite I won't back it. Because I know I can buy it at my store later and support my local game store.
My thing for that is also, like, something like Gloomhaven. It's $140 normally, $150, depending on how people want to price it while they're selling it. Whereas if you go back to Kickstarter, you can get it for $100. So you basically save yourself $40, and you can use that $40 to buy something else within that Kickstarter. So
right, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so that big discount is a major factor. But I've seen ones where it's $5 cheaper than retail. Yeah, well, unless it's a $20 game, you know.
But if I'm able to save 10, 15, 20% on a game by doing the Kickstarter rather than buying it retail, yeah, that's going to be something I'm going to look at, especially for a game like Gloomhaven where it's $150 and I save $40.
Right, exactly. I couldn't agree more. Do you want to take the next one?
I just did the last one, so...
Oh, never mind. William said, I've only pledged for one Kickstarter called Anomaly, and I backed it for 2 reasons. One, it looked like a cool idea worth supporting, and it was in danger of not being funded. That is, my pledge wasn't a pre-order, but necessary to get the project off the ground, which is what I thought Kickstarter was for. Once the game has met its funding goals, I have zero interest in buying a pig in a poke. Yeah, that's an interesting goal, or that's an interesting outlook on it. It seems like there's not that many game. If a game is really solid and it's from a company that's done this hundreds of times over, you know, it's gonna fund in a few hours, more often than not. So it becomes what's called kind of like a pre-order system in a way. It's like, well, we already know we're gonna make the game. We just want to see how many we want to pre-order.
Yeah, no, I get that. Again, I keep bringing them up, but Come On is that way. It's a lot of their games. They're going to sell regardless, but Kickstarter is just a pre-order system for them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like Kickstarter does a little bit more. I'd say Queen is more of a...
Queen is more of the pre-order, yeah, but Come On... I mean, think about it. Come On is basically the pre-order. The only thing that the difference is that they give you the Kickstarter exclusive stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna I'm gonna bring up something else here in a bit that I think would be pretty interesting. All right, let's hear what Einar says.
Yeah, I was just gonna use his middle name on that one because I didn't know how to pronounce his first name. Is it Einar? He's closing in on 200 Kickstarter backings, mostly games.
Good job, man.
Up front, I will rarely back a game just to support the creator concept, but it still happens. I've also become a lot more selective backing, both due to experience good and bad, and increasingly large collection. Why I will back a game? It has to provide a benefit or an incentive for me to back. Save money over retail, which we discussed. This could be deceptive and includes shipping. Provide additional content, preferably game content, which is another good one. Have exclusive or extras that will be costly or difficult to get otherwise, something that won't go in retail big boxes, storage solutions, or bundles. Exclusive, save money, exclusives and / save money, and a positive campaign interaction with backers. The real question is, why risk backing now versus wait for retail? I have been burned a few times, but overall had a positive Kickstarter experience. At this point, I won't throw my money at anything as my money, time, and space are limited. It should go without saying that I need to be interested in the game as well, gameplay, theme, aesthetics, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, he has a brilliant point on that. It makes sense. It's why back a Kickstarter if you know it's going to go to a store and you know it's going to be there, and really all what you're trying to do is you're Kickstarter is intended to help fund a project that is unlikely to have. Now I understand why Amazon, who owns Kickstarter, doesn't care too much because they get a cut of the profits. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, have at it, right? From their point of view, and it's not like in that aspect, it does still make sense. And then from companies like Come On, like I don't want to paint them in a bad light because I feel like what they're doing is they're using Kickstarter as a wise platform. What they ultimately do is they decide, hey, look, well, we feel like this is going to be this popular, and we know it's going to be big, but do you want to risk, $100,000 on buying a game?
I think the big thing for them, for Come On, and I've noticed it, is that they use the Kickstarter to fund their bigger games, but the reason why they do all these stretch goal stuff is try to get people to give them more and more money for the game, is because it basically makes them a slush fund. That's how we get games like Potion Explosion and what is that, Foodies and stuff like that. That pays for like the smaller games that they don't throw on Kickstarter, just stuff that they throw out to the stores. Gizmos is another one. That's a Come On game that did not go to Kickstarter.
Right. That's a good point, yeah, because that's just because their one big game is going to Kickstarter doesn't mean all their games that they're publishing are going to Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But there's definitely more word of mouth about the ones that go to Kickstarter, isn't there?
And like I said, I think they use it for a slush fund. Basically, they give them more money to use for other games that don't really fit what people... Because what people forget, Come On stood for Cool Mini or Not. So all they were known for was these big, grandiose mini-games. Arcadia Quest, Rising Sun, Blood Rage. And now they're actually known for games. Potion Explosion is not a mini-game. Gizmos is not a mini-game. Both those games deal with marbles.
Yeah, exactly.
Foodies is a card game. God of War, the card game, is a card game. It doesn't have minis on it. Though, if they ever make a God of War board game, I'm probably going to back that in a heartbeat.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And going back to the point where he's talking about exclusivities like big box and storage solutions, part of it, that's true for me too. Is if you can see right up there, this one right here is the role player big box, and that was one of the main reasons why. One, I already liked the game, so I knew I was going to back the expansion, but I increased my price to get that big box, so everything is in there now, and it helps me personally because I have a limited amount of space to store my games. And so if I can put everything into one box or two boxes, like I have Everdell up there and Eldritch Horror over here, it just makes things easier.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that. Corey Horn says exclusives, unique concept, quality components, reasonable price, and not too expensive to go all in. He says, for the last one, if it checks all the other boxes, but I have to spend like over $120 to go all in, I might not get it at all since it bugs me to have an incomplete games or lack options in game. Might pay more if it really strikes me. That's a really great point from Corey.
He also adds, in general, hitting these market appeals to a wider market and will get more backers. If it's middleweight, it has solo mode, campaign mode, and miniatures, which is true.
Yeah, he's definitely right. I was going to bring that up, or all in or not is what I kind of titled it. If there was a game that was all in for $400 and you think that you would really like it, and you don't have $400, would you buy a $60 version of the game?
It just depends. If I can get it at retail, then yeah, I'll get the $60 version. That's fine. But something like the Batman game, as I was talking about, that's not going to retail. That never will be in retail. It's probably maybe their store market, the people who do it.
But the question is, let's say if it's not going to retail, but in the Batman case, you didn't back any level, did you?
No, I did not.
Yeah.
But that was more so because even at the cheapest level, I think it was like $120.
Oh, okay.
And there was another reason why I didn't back it, and I don't have this on my list, and I should. So let's just add it as my third honorable mention that I'm not going to mention. I avoid Kickstarters mostly when I know some of my friends or people in my game group are going to back it.
Right.
Because honestly, I've played my copy of Rising Sun maybe twice, maybe 3 times, but I've played other people's versions of Rising Sun several times. I think I've played Rising Sun maybe 6-7 times.
Yeah.
And so it just, to that point, unless it's a game I really, really want, like Gloomhaven and Frosthaven, I won't back a Kickstarter if I know. case in point, Tiny Epic.
Yeah.
I like the Tiny Epic games. There's some that I don't like. There's some that I do like. But there's 3 people in my game group, you included,
Yep.
that are getting the Tiny Epic games. So I've gotten one, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. You have a group to play it with. Why spend all the money, even if it's exclusive? That was kind of my mindset when you backed Merlin, knowing that how big of a fan of Stefan Feld you and I both are.
Yeah.
I didn't have enough to get the all-in with the expansions and the deluxe bits, so I ended up not backing it at all, even though I genuinely enjoyed the game and I knew I was probably going to like it. It was an interesting idea. It's like, well, because of the fact that there was such a high backing level for the all-in part of it, I don't want to miss out on those, so I'm just not going to get the base game and call it a day. And that's a really weird idea. It's almost a deterrent in a way.
No, I get it. Yeah, and for me, it is a deterrent, especially when it comes to, like, okay, Bryce is getting it. Okay, Dom's getting it. You're getting it. Why do I need to back it? Why do I need to spend the money? I should save the money on a game that you guys aren't getting if it's something that interests me.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. Awesome. Did you read the last one? I did.
No, you did.
Okay.
I just read his follow-up.
Gotcha.
Chris adds, with only 2 exceptions, every game I have backed on Kickstarter has been a deluxe reprint of an already published game. I care about production value, but I don't like the idea of selling a game to a lot of people when very few people have had the opportunity to try it and provide feedback. Both the new games I backed were word games, as that is a genre that I like more than most people.
That's a good point. Yeah, he definitely focuses on that style of game. But yeah, I like what he says about that. He only backs it if it's a deluxe reprint of a game, that, like a deluxified version. Tasty Minstrel is known for that. They've made plenty of great
Queen
deluxes.
Game is another one that's known for it too.
Yep,
they just,
Queen Games.
especially when they do their big boxes, they usually do deluxe with it.
Yep, exactly. So that's a good. If he's waiting for that to already be proven as a game, and maybe even played it. Like, for example, I can think of a good example. Genties. That was a game from Tasty Minstrel that I didn't back. It looked okay, but I didn't know anything about it. And I've been thrown off before. But after I've played it, I'm like, okay, now if they do another Kickstarter, I'm in, because that's a phenomenal game. And especially if it's a remake. If it's just like a second edition, I'll probably just buy it off of retail.
Yeah. Well, it does help that you work at a game shop, so you have a little bit of a discount.
Technically, but it helps because I have that immersion. But at the same time, it's not the discount.
Sometimes we'll get demo copies, so you have to learn the game anyway, so you'll be able to play it beforehand and decide if you want to buy it.
Exactly, I have that advantage, but that's a factor in whether I back it or not. Because if it's one that I already liked and they're likely to make a deluxe version, well, wow. Like, Crusaders, that's another good example. I finally got a chance to play that, and it was phenomenal. I loved it. It was such a good game that now if they remake it, I'm gonna back it.
They've already done the deluxe version, so who knows if Tasty Minstrel's going to do it again.
Right, exactly. Make a reprint of a reprint.
But the thing about Tasty Minstrel, or just most games on Kickstarter, what I like about them is when you get into the Pledge Manager, or you can actually buy some of the game if they still have it in stock through the Pledge Manager. Oh, you want the Crusaders Kickstarter? Yeah. Well, here you go. Here's your chance to buy it now that you can.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's see here. Gabriel. At the start, first, number 1, theme, historical. If it's a historical theme, he's probably in. Number 2.
He must get the Academy games then.
He must get Academies, yeah, right? Number 2, cool idea. Currently, publisher designer. Will it work with my group? Theme, fear of missing out. Do I just want the game? Yeah.
So I agree with his number 1. I do like theme in it. Historical is actually kind of cool, and I'll tell you, I am was on a Academy game Kickstarter because the theme intrigued me.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the moon. What's it called? I forget what it's called, but it's about the space race between the Russians and the Americans.
Oh yeah, that theme is phenomenal, right? And speaking of, later today is going to be that new launch too. Hopefully, if it doesn't get canceled, the SpaceX launch. So that I was going to bring that up because that's a theme that I'm really interested in. In fact, I'm wearing a shuttle shirt today for that reason, because that's a theme that's exciting for me. So
I got a Bigfoot hat on. That's what I got going
on. There you go. All right. Kevin says theme and art.
This one's me.
Oh, fine. Go for it.
Theme and art will get me to click, but then your gameplay has to sell me to get me to back. I don't drool over buckets of minis, and I don't like campaign or legacy games. There's always that one guy. I want a game that I can play in its entirety on a Saturday night with the crew, which, by the way, I have on the way in. The last 2 games I backed were puzzle games.
Yeah. See, I completely agree with him. Like, the buckets of minis, those are great and all, but if a game is $60 because it has minis, but really it could have been done as a card game, then I'm more interested in the card game. You know, a good example.
Since the game right over your shoulder, it wasn't Kickstarter or anything, but Horrify can show you that you can have a cheap game with minis in it.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to have a lot of minis. It could have a few. There's another game that's coming out with minis pretty soon, Ascension Tactics. That I already know that I like the game, and they're not going to do deck building with, like, they're not going to have a bag of minis, you know, you're not going to pull it like that. You're going to have the deck, but then you're going to have a mini on the board. That's alright, you know, but if it has, like, look at this 3-foot tall miniature of, like, Cthulhu that it's like $200 just to get this statue alone, like, okay, I don't care.
The thing about that is, they knew what they were doing. It's just a funny little gimmick, and honestly, I love that statue. The thing is amazing.
Yeah, no, I like it too. I appreciate that they did it, and I enjoy them for doing it, but that's not going to get my money to do it.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, Jacob says, if it's a good game, most of them you only hear about when it's on Kickstarter, then they're never heard from again, or heard about again, even after delivery. Only a few stand out. That's why I don't back Kickstarters. Gameplay is usually meh, and they're way overhyped. Let's talk about that overhype real quick.
Now, the overhype, yeah, I'll agree with. But let's go back to his first point that that once they're out, you'll never hear about them again. But that's most games in general. There are always games that are, since there's so many games coming out nowadays, something is going to be big for a little bit and then disappear, even if they're on Kickstarter or not. And one that I can think of is the one right behind you, Thanos Rising. It was a big, popular game when it came out, but you hardly ever hear anything about it. In fact, I see more about the Star Wars game than I do about the Thanos game.
Yeah.
On, like, the Facebook,
social media and all that stuff. Everybody's like, yeah, it was a fun game. We liked it. Anyway, let's go on to that. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's not just Kickstarter. It's just gaming in general, because there's so many good games that are being pumped out over and over again, with a few exceptions, like, say, a Gloomhaven or a Pandemic and stuff like that.
Right. That does make me question if it's a Kickstarter. There is that likelihood that it could just be a bad game. I'll bring up one example, and not trying to put anything down, but Mega Man. That was a huge game, and the pieces were great. I can
tell you one from personal experience. My first ever Kickstarter was Ghostbusters.
Oh yeah.
I was highly disappointed in that game. The game wasn't bad. It's just that when you're making it, it's supposed to be like, oh, this is played over chapters, but nothing changes. It's the same gameplay. You bust some ghosts, you try not to run out of ghosts, that sort of thing. Nothing really major happens, and then you fight the big bad. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. Game over. Yeah.
Game 1 and Game 10 were exactly the same.
Yeah. Or game 1 didn't affect how you play Game 10, which is what a campaign should. You should have that ability. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that. It's so disappointing when you're getting to that point where it's like, okay, well, you know, some of these are just kind of disappointments after you've received it and spent so much money backing it. And some of them might even be made up. Like, I'm going to give... I just kind of knocked Jasco Games a little bit because of Mega Man, but I'm going to give them a lot of credit for picking up Evil Dead 2, which was not a game that they kickstarted, but they saw that it ran away with it, and then they picked it up, and they're fulfilling the people. They ran another Kickstarter to help pay for that, but they didn't want anybody to be out. So, I mean, good on them. That's amazing that they did that. Now,
but yeah, that's a thing with Kickstarter you have to worry about too, is you have to pay attention to who's backing the game and follow their track record.
Yeah.
Because it's a crapshoot when it comes to it sometimes.
Right. Exactly. Or another good example is Gamelin games. Generally, I like all the Tiny Epic games, but like Heroes of Land, Sea and Air, I was disappointed in. But even some of the Epic games like Western, I really didn't enjoy.
I'm not a fan of Western.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a shot in the dark. There's a chance that it might be a bad game, and you have no way to try that. Which goes back to if they had a tabletop sim mod or something like that, where they're actively trying to have people play it. That makes it like, hey, look, here's a free demo. Come try it.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate.
See if you like it, and if you're interested, back it.
I hate to keep bringing it up, but Level 99 does that with most of their games. They're doing it right now with Bullet, and if you're not sure if it's something you'd like, go try it. And at first it didn't seem like something I would enjoy, but our friend Ithri, who's a regular on the channel, he showed me how to play it, and holy cow, I was amazed by it, and now I'm a backer for sure, because it was just legitimately a fun game, and I'm glad I got that demo, because I might not have backed it otherwise.
Cool. So you're next, or no, I'm next. Ryan. Great price, company I trust, gameplay I'm familiar with, know and enjoy, and cost.
Yep,
Short
cost.
and sweet.
Yep, short and sweet. I couldn't agree more. I think we already talked about that. If it's like a $400 game, then just you're ruling out a lot of people. Mark said, theme, artwork, a rule book. The rest I can fill in myself if I'm interested. If my name's attached to it, then it's good to go. Seriously though, looking at who's involved and their track record.
So I agree with the rulebook part, and I can bring up a good point on this. We've talked about it earlier, the Batman board game. Our buddy backed it, has it, we played it. The rulebook is atrocious. Trying to figure out how certain things work. There's a lot of iconography that isn't explained in the rulebook. He actually had to go to BGG and print out like a cheat sheet that people make. Not even the game people, just random people over the internet decided, we need to sit this up there to help people out. It just for us to understand how this works and how this works and way this works. The game is fun, don't get me wrong, but it took us forever to figure out how we're going to play it.
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel about the publishers who post their rule book for the backers to read?
I like that for two reasons. One, it makes it where people can get an understanding of the game before they back it, and you already have it. Say you already have it in PDF and you know it's shipping, you can be prepared to get it to the table right away. And two, it allows them to get free proofreading and editing. So if there's questions before the final product of the rule book, they can answer those questions and fix it in the rule book before they do a final print of it.
Yeah. I've always appreciated when they went that extra mile to have the rule book ready. The components and playtesting might still be, in the works, but as long as if they post that rule book, that helps give the people a mindset of how everything works and if it's actually thought through.
Yeah. So Stefano says, a price adequate for a game I will get in a year.
It's a good point. There is a long wait for a board game. Best case a year.
Now with everything that is going on in the world and the slowdowns and the shutdowns and the lockdowns, especially since a lot of people do realize in the gaming community, most of these games are made in China because of the cost effectiveness of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they were the ones most affected by this pandemic at the beginning. So a lot of these companies were shut down.
Yeah.
I think Queen is one of the few I know that don't use China. They have their own printing company in Germany that they do all their stuff.
Right. Yeah, and there's thankfully companies like Ludofact and other ones that are German based have a little bit of an advantage. They're still being hit, but not nearly to the effect of China shut down.
Yeah. So that's why a lot of Kickstarters that are being delayed. I have one that was already delayed to begin with because it's a mini game and things are going to happen. It always happens with these kind of games. There's always going to be delays to be expected. But they had that delay, and then they had another delay on top of it because of the shutdown. And case in point, I've been reading a thing about another board game, and that's going to go to some of the stuff that we're talking about, and that's Horizon Zero Dawn, the board game that they made. They've already had, I think it was like an 8-month delay because some of the stuff was backed up, and now they're adding another 16 months on top of that. This game backed in 2016, I want to say, something like that.
Wow.
And they're already adding more delays because of the thing, and a lot of people are unhappy with it because they're like, well, then what was the original? I can understand this delaying it, but why is it doubling what your original delay was?
Yeah.
Because there's people who are already getting their games out that had a delay.
I was going to say, I saw a post just this morning on one of my game groups, and I don't know what game they were talking about, but they said they're like at this point it feels like the publisher was making excuses, which I mean that's both on the publisher and the customer to understand. It's like, look, there could be, what if they get their first proof and there's a terrible error that they have to really go back and change everything. Like
I just found another honorable mention I need to talk about, but we'll get there when we finally get into our list.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Randy says 4 player minimum, 5 or 6 preferred. That's fair. He has a big group. That makes perfect sense. He knows what works with his group.
Ryan says exclusive content or below retail price, something I couldn't get at retail. So many games I could have just waited for and got cheaper, which is true.
Yep. Jordan says, in order of importance, a solo variant must be the first one. Price, theme, and Kickstarter exclusives, or will only be available in American retail. Therefore, I am not American and will not be able to get it otherwise. So, yeah, that makes sense. If you can't get it in a store, that makes it important. Solo variant, that seems to be a really big thing now.
Yeah, a lot of people, sometimes they can't get together with a game group, especially right now, but solo play has becoming a large rise in gaming for the last couple of years, I've noticed.
Yeah.
So if you look at, like, even games that don't go to Kickstarter, Horrified, mentioning again, has a solo variant. Gloomhaven puts solo scenarios in both Gloomhaven and Frosthaven. Most co-ops can be basically played solo, so there's a lot going on, so it's understandable.
Yeah, definitely.
Everdell, one of the games I just recently backed last year, it has a solo variant in it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I can't help but think of it. My games, the ones that I design, like, would it be important for me to work on making a solo variant so that way people can play it as a one-player game and still enjoy it, where that was never in my original design. So that's something that I'm in the back of my mind now thinking of. It's like, wow, what would I do if I had to do this?
All right, so Trevor adds, none. The masses have been feeding this monster to the point of gluttony. It is to the point that well-established companies who could easily afford to launch and release a game are feeding off the masses. I miss the old days when publishers failed if their game failed. At this point, it's no longer about gaming. It's publishing a toy collect-a-thon.
And then,
I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't make fun of like people like this, but he kind of sounds like one of those people. Get off my lawn!
Right, but he does bring up a very valid point at the same time, right? It's like, well, I'm going to use this one as an example. I'm pointing to my game Ogre. They made a designer edition that was massive, right? Ogre was a game where it was like $260 because it had minis and all sorts of fancy stuff. JD replied, he said, Trevor, I would say I agree-ish. The Kickstarter market has been especially flooded lately with plastic and flair and lacking substance. But sadly, if that is what is selling and people are buying/wanting, then couldn't the argument be made and that those game companies, are in turn quote-unquote successful?
So, to reiterate a point that I was saying earlier about Come On, a lot of these Kickstarters that he's talking about that are successful, a lot of the times it's slush funds. It's basically to give them extra funds to help them with future games that aren't going to go to Kickstarter.
Right.
So I see both aspects of it. I understand where they're both coming from, and there's a good point. But they're not seeing the overall business arc of it. Kickstarter helps them procure games for later on.
Right.
And give them a slush fund, basically, to help them produce other games outside of Kickstarter.
Yeah, definitely. And then he replied, I don't know if we want to say this whole thing, because they had a great discussion going back and forth.
Yeah, no.
Some of the topics.
Just move on. But yeah, it was a great discussion. If you guys want to read it yourself, again, just go to the Board Game Revolution group on Facebook, and you'll be able to find it pretty easily. It's one of the up there. Yeah,
but Trevor did bring up the fact that it's like nowadays it seems like gaming is all about shelfies and just showing off your game collection. Now, I don't know why anybody would think that, especially watching our channel. That sounds completely over the no, I do agree with him. this is a backdrop, obviously, for us.
Yeah.
And I do have quite a bit of games, but that's how I do it. Is I am a collector, so that's for me. I get that, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I do see a lot of people. It's like, hey, look at my collection. Check out what I got. And it's less about.
There's nothing wrong with that. If you think about it, if let's look at Wingspan real quick. If you're in the board gaming hobby, if you're into looking at not board gaming but bird watching hobby, you're gonna tell. My uncle is a bird watcher, and so he has a book and he marks every bird that he has seen. And when he gets together or in a group discussion with his chat, he says, "Hey, I seen these birds at this location. If you guys want to go find them, if they're still there, they're nesting there." It's the same thing with board gaming. We're gonna talk about the games we own, the games we like. We're gonna show pictures of the games we've seen. He's showing pictures of the birds he's seen. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, definitely. I don't disagree with you. JD says, number 1, fun factor. 2, replayability. 3, unique gameplay. 4, art plus theme. 5, the game is easy enough to teach, learn by most gamers, but still have a skill curve worth playing. I can't help but just say that I think he probably considers this on any game that he owns.
He buys.
Or buys. I don't think it... I do agree with all of these points, but that's not exclusive to Kickstarter, I don't feel.
But there's nothing wrong with that. If you're holding Kickstarter games to the same standard of board games you own in general, that's a good basis, honestly, because if this is a Kickstarter that's not going to match your board gaming style, why are you going to back it?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to take this one because Peter's a friend of mine. Okay. Peter says, often theme gets me attracted. Gameplay and mechanics get me to consider, and quality/replay are then factored. Sometimes it's just an impulsive. And then he replies to himself, okay, more than I should are impulsive.
Is this the Peter who was with us last week?
No, this is Peter who we met in El Paso, who lives up in Colorado.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. He's a friend of mine. He's a really nice guy. He's supported my games, so of course, I completely agree with his comments. But yeah, he brings in the impulsivity of it. If I remember I've had times where it's like, oh well, I have a couple $100 to burn, whatever. Let's just look through Kickstarter. Boom, 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 done. Those are cool.
So Goki. Sorry if I butchered your name and you're watching. Me, heavy and thematic game that doesn't have a major publisher. It's not super expensive, has a clear video about gameplay. Last 2 I got into were PAX Premier and PAX Renaissance reprints.
Yeah. Yep. I couldn't agree more. I like how they brought up the fact that if they don't have a major publisher, that you could tell it's just like a small guy or like a 1 or 2 group. Like Frosthaven, that's published by Isaac Childress. That is him. One guy. Right? I mean, I'm sure he has his family and friends who help, but it's one guy. Well, he's got his
wife, and then he's got like a group of designers that help him playtest, but it's just him.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really what Kickstarter is about. I mean, one argument could be about that it's like, well, he clearly funds millions of dollars. He doesn't need our help anymore. Well, no, he does. It's his. Yeah. It's his livelihood. And like, it's not like he sees $12 million of profit. No.
Yeah.
He has to make the games and ship them and publish them. It's like...
Yeah, he's a one-man band, basically.
Yeah, he might have enough to carry himself.
Going back to that, when you look at someone like Jamie Stegmaier, he used to do the Kickstarter route. Scythe was his last one. Now he does it basically exclusive. And he's one of the people that used it that successfully, where Kickstarter was half his games, and now he doesn't do Kickstarter anymore. He has enough to fund his stuff.
Yeah, exactly. He used it as a funding source originally. Jeffrey says, does it have dice? Then probably. I like that. Short and to the point. And then...
Vincent adds, will it go to retail or not? If so, are there any exclusives or not? Usually retail will be cheaper because of the shipping cost, which is true.
Yep, I agree. Harrison says, theme, art, solo mode, required. Pledge $1 gets you access to a pledge manager. If it goes retail, I'll generally pass unless there is a large amount of Kickstarter exclusive content.
Alright, so again, if you want to see the discussion, there was a discussion with this one. We're just going to, this way we can just shorten this up a little bit and we can get into our stuff. I'm going to move on to the next guy whose name I cannot pronounce.
Okay.
It's the Russian alphabet. Cyrillic is his name, so I don't know how to pronounce the lettering properly. Yeah. So he adds, if I, or she, I honestly don't know. If I like the theme, I will pledge $1 always. For a full pledge, I have to like the rest. Mechanics, graphics, minis, that sort of thing.
Yeah. That makes sense. I like how they're supporting it no matter what. They're saying, and I'm glad they bring up the pledge manager and being able to buy stuff later on. I have a feeling we'll talk about that later on. Renee says, price and exclusive content.
I'm noticing the trend that exclusive content is one of the major factors for people.
Yeah.
It goes to the FOMO aspect of it.
Yep.
Roberto says, quality components, affordable price, interesting theme, but most importantly, does the game look interesting and or fun?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Andrew says, price, A1, solo mode, another one, mechanics theme, and designer, publisher have pedigree, and number 5, the first one who said this, a decent gameplay video. Like, they actually want to see how the game is played, and that kind of goes into the, would you rather see a video or rulebook, or just be up in the air about it?
It's funny about these gameplay videos. That's probably one of the least likely things I'll pay attention to.
That's a big one for me.
Because, and here's why, a lot of the games that I like to back, they go to someone like Rado, or a couple other people like on Dice Tower. What is it, Mark Street? He'll do Kickstarter
previews.
Stuff. I'd rather see that to have a better understanding of how the game plays, because sometimes the gameplay video it's all CGI. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that, which kind of makes sense going into the next comment.
Positive from Steven. Positive review from Rado or Z.
There you go. Yeah. So he already knows that Rado and Z Garcia of the Dice Tower, I'm guessing, that has a similar taste in games as he does. So if they have a positive review, it's almost a shoo-in. Jerome, I might be mispronouncing your name wrong. I apologize if I am. Says, do I own something similar? What is the company's track record in terms of delivery, customer support, and game systems? Are there gameplay videos? And if so, does the gameplay appeal to me? Are there unicorns involved? What is the cost-quality ratio? I don't know if the unicorns are a deterrent or a factor if you would back it, but obviously that's a thing for him. But yeah, I mean, that do I own something similar? That's also another good rule of thumb if you're just buying a game in general. It's like if I want to buy Karuba, do I already have like a bingo style tile laying game? Well, if I do, then why am I buying both?
Yeah, and for our last one here, Mark, supporting small companies, upgraded components, significant savings.
Yeah, it's significant
short,
savings.
Sweet. Yeah, significant savings. Like I was saying, Frosthaven, $40 is nice to save.
Yeah.
I only spend it elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a big chunk of change too. $40 is not nothing.
No, exactly. And for me, a lot of the people were saying like, yeah, they're gonna make it up on shipping costs and stuff like that. I already know they're gonna make it up on shipping costs. I already have that factored in. Yeah. So if I'm paying for a game that's $100, I'm already expecting it to be, say, 140, something like that, for the shipping cost. It's already factored into my budget when I'm backing it.
Yeah.
The fact that I can save $40 off extra stuff and buy that extra stuff later on after the fact is nice for me, basically.
Definitely. So, what are your thoughts on? I've covered another one of these that I talked about specifically. But I want to get your thoughts before we get started on what do you feel about companies that have already been established, whether they're small publishers or not, but they've already been established and then decide to do a Kickstarter route. For whatever reason, I don't like, and I'm going to bring up 2 examples. Smirk and Dagger is one. They have a game coming soon to Kickstarter, and I think they've only done like 1 or 2 Kickstarters ever before, but they've published significant amount of games.
Yeah.
And then Fireside coming out with Castle Panic Deluxe with a big box and miniatures and all that stuff coming to Kickstarter as well. What are your thoughts on publishers that have already had a reputation moving to Kickstarter?
I have no issue with it, honestly. I'm not to the point where some of these people are like, hey, they can already produce the game. Why don't they do it? You know, if people are willing to back it, then go to Kickstarter. It's fine. You have games that, like I said, and a lot of times they use it for slush fun purposes. With a game like with Fireside Games with the Castle Panic Deluxe, they're going that route because I think it makes more sense for them to do it that way because they want to see the kind of demand for it. Plus, it's as big as the game is going to be. There's no guarantee they have the kind of money to make it because of all the minis that they're adding in there, the plastic pieces and stuff like that. It's not something they normally do. Castle Panic, all that was cardboard. Hot Shots behind you. The most expensive stuff in there is probably the dice.
Probably.
So their games are relatively on the lower side of cost, so they probably don't have the kind of money to do something like Castle Panic Deluxe without the help of Kickstarter. Not that I'm saying that they're broke or anything like that, but just more of the fact that they use their money wisely when they're coming out with games, and this one is going to be a bigger, grandioser style game than they're normally used to making.
Right.
As for Smirk and Dagger, again, I have no issue with it. Yeah, it could be the fact that this might be a bigger game than they're normally not going to normally produce. They normally do. So they might want that little bit of help and see how it goes. And other than that, I have no problem with it for bigger games. Queen is notorious for it. They were established before they went the Kickstarter routes, and now that's all they really like going is Kickstarter. And it's fine, especially in this time, with no guarantee of people being able to go to the stores and stuff like that. Kickstarter might be an easier route for them because of that reason. People aren't going to the game stores, so their game still is able to get out there. They can back it ahead of time and basically pre-order it. I think Kickstarter is at that point where basically, for some companies, it's a pre-order system. And I have no problem with it. If you go to GameStop and pre-order a video game, nobody has issue with it, and you get some exclusive bonuses from pre-ordering, say, a GameStop or a Best Buy or something, or a Walmart. There is that on the video game route, and we're already used to that and fine with it on the video game route. What's wrong with it being used in the board gaming route? The only problem is there's only one place you can go, and that's Kickstarter. I mean, you could do Indiegogo, but there's issues with that as well.
Yeah, and the way that distributors and retailers and publishers are just set up, there's just you don't have a good way to pre-order content. Video game companies, you can totally pre-order content because then they can just order, a small quantity, have a local publisher. Where this board game, these things need to be printed in a big thing. So I mean, it's definitely a factor in that.
Yeah, no. So I have no issue with it.
Yeah.
And as for Kickstarter exclusives, it bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's along the line that's how it's good business practice. I hate to say it, but it is, because it's going to get people to back your game because they're going to realize, well, I can't get this. It's the FOMO. They're playing off the FOMO.
Yeah. I've always and this is how I believe in this, and this is how I've always conducted. I refuse to let my games have Kickstarter exclusives that add to gameplay. And what I mean by that is that if the solo mode is only for Kickstarter backers, or if there is even like a single promo card where it's like, look, if you're a backer of the Kickstarter, you get this one promo card. Well, that adds to the gameplay. It's not. I don't agree with that at all. I've really disliked it every time that is, because that means that later on, anybody who just couldn't afford it's impossible for them to get that exclusive content, and that is a portion of their game that is now removed.
And a big reason why I don't like Kickstarter exclusive stuff is the resale market. People price gouge like there's no tomorrow because they know there's going to be people that are going to pay it, and it's like, I don't mind you making money off of it, make $10, $15 per the extra stuff, but when you're doubling, tripling the price because people want that piece, it's just it bothers me that people are taking advantage of other people. And some people say it's good business practice. For me, it's seedy, it's dirty. It's like people scalping tickets to a ball game.
Sure, yeah. Now, if you add Kickstarter exclusives that are like upgraded components, that are better quality, play mats, deck boxes, storage things
Yeah.
that aren't
Storage solutions. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I have no
dice
problem with
towers.
those whatsoever.
accessories, yeah, then those I appreciate. Like, so for example, one of my favorite Kickstarters that I've ever backed is the Pyramid Arcade from Looney Labs. I love that. Except I didn't back it. I bought it at retail, and I've since bought some of the promos. But the elusive pink, pink pyramids that were only for Kickstarter, I can't get a hold of, but I'm also not as upset for them for doing that because I could play with any other pyramids. I just want to have a complete set, and I want the pink ones, but that doesn't make me dislike the fact that they had that exclusive. Now, if you can only use it in a game, yeah, exactly. If it changed the gameplay and there was ones that you can only play with the pink pyramids, then I'd be upset. So, that's my thought on Kickstarter exclusives.
Now, so you want to get into this?
Yep, we've belabored the point.
I have a third honorable mention that I just thought of as we were going through that list because it came into my mind. So just so you know. So the third honorable mention, because I never wrote it down, let me remember it, is good communication with the backers as you're going through it. That's a big proponent for me. We ran into this problem with Gray Fox Games recently for not Paladins. What is it? Reavers of the North Sea, or Reavers of Midgard.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of communication problems. They have fixed it since then, but yeah. So there was a lot of stuff. People were upset. They weren't communicating very well. To me, I didn't think they were not communicating very well. They weren't communicating great. I've had some that really communicated very well. They were just kind of hit or miss with the communications, and I didn't have a problem with it. But yeah, good communication is key to Kickstarter. If they're known for good communication with their backers, why there's a delay, explaining why the delay is going on, what has happened, because there was a quality issue with their game trays, and that's what a lot of people were complaining about. And it took them almost 2 months to say, yeah, we something messed up in the thing. This is not what we paid for. We're going to go ahead and start resending those out.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost worse. It's almost worse to wait it out and have lack of communication. That's a good point. If the more that you keep, it's better to overwhelm your backers with too much information than to keep them in the dark. Oh, I completely agree with that. That's awesome. But that won't decide whether you back the Kickstarter or not. That's just unfortunately something you find out after.
But it will back me for future. Like if a company, let's just say, Kaman has bad communication issues, I might not want to back another one of their games. Which is hypothetical
because we know they actually have good communication.
Yeah, they're one of the best. I'm just because that's what's been on my mind because they're the main Kickstarter. I'm sorry, they just are.
Yeah, I don't blame you. My first honorable mention is if they're a reputable company. If they have a whole backlog, it's not in my top 3, but that's just it. It's more likely I'll back them if I know that they have produced things before, and that goes back into when I've backed Kickstarters for playing cards, and that because you've heard of the stories of people not fulfilling and then like the people running away with the money. Well, that happens. It doesn't happen that often, but it happens more often in playing cards as a hobby than it does with board games. Every board game I've backed, I've received. Every playing card I've backed, it's about 1 in 20 that have disappeared and ran away with the money. And so it's a shame, but thankfully it doesn't hurt as bad because a deck of playing cards is $5-10. So it's whatever. But I mean, my loss, okay, that's fine. But if I backed a $200 board game and then the publishers disappeared, man, that hurts. And that's a scary risk going into it.
And it's happened a couple times. There's been some horror stories about it.
Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned it earlier with Evil Dead.
Yeah.
There was also that.
There was a lot more.
This way, but the Monopoly rip off with Cthulhu in it. It basically.
Terror in Atlantic City. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's been other factors in it too, like with that. But I mean, we don't want to. We're not going to allege that somebody just ran off with the money, but that could have happened, Yeah. And then, but eventually they did come to market with the use of companies that are reputable, like Jasco. So, like,
and someone else did the same thing with the Terror in Atlantic City.
Yeah. So that Evil Dead, I was very strongly considering backing the original one because I love Evil Dead. It's one of my favorite movies. But now if Jasco did a Kickstarter for it, like separate, it's like, hey, look, we're going to make a reprint of like Evil Dead or even Army of Darkness or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're reputable. I know that they're going to fulfill their promise. They fulfilled somebody else's promise even. That's how reputable they are. So that's my first
Yeah,
honorable
exactly.
mention.
I'm just looking something up real quick before I can make a point here.
Okay.
But my next one is success of past Kickstarters.
So that kind of goes into
when
the same reputation thing.
Yeah, go with that. It's the same what you were saying. Do they have a what is it? Do they have a reputable reputation? Do they back their stuff? We're talking about the Evil Dead. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because, again, I've been seeing it a lot on Dice Tower Facebook group. I've seen it in Board Game Revolution. I've seen it in Board Game Spotlight. I'm in a few board game group, and it's the Steam Forge Games is the company, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, but people have said this is the last time they're backing one of their games because of the communication issues, the delays, because this is the second game that this has happened, and people are saying this is because they want to make sure they can throw it in retail as well as getting it to their backers' hands before everything gets out there. And so that is a major issue because from everybody who said they've backed this one in their other game that they've backed of them, it's had this problem. It's Horizon Zero Dawn's been delayed massively, partly because of the pandemic that's going on, but there was delays beforehand. And then they said this the same thing that happened with Dark Souls, the board game that they've also created, that these delays were just massive. It took them 2, 3, 4 years before the games got into their hands. And it's because they don't communicate well. And that's what goes back to my first honorable mention is the good communication. And backers are upset.
Yeah.
And so that, for me, is because of that, this is a company that if they have and I looked at Horizon Zero Dawn. I love the video game. And I was like, okay, this looks kind of cool. But because of their past success, I was like, I'm going to hold back. Maybe I won't get it. Maybe I'll get the retail version when it comes into stores. And it's because of that. And now that I'm hearing this all over again with this specific board game, this makes me very wary to back them because of all the issues. And companies should be aware of this, and what people don't realize outside the gaming community, it's a small community, so there's a lot of discussion, a lot of talk, so people find out about these things, and that makes them wary as well.
That's a very good point. Yeah, and that's.
And another reason why people were upset about this is that they're making them pay more shipping to get their games, and they're going to do it in waves. So they have to pay more shipping costs after what they've already paid for.
Yeah, that's just because shipping changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's a shame, but that's already like adding fuel to the fire, you know.
Exactly.
If you've given them that many reasons already to dislike your products, they're never going to back again. Whether they like the game or not. In fact, they might even take that bias towards the game and might not even like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if they normally would have.
Like I said, if it's in retail and I can get it on sale, I may try it out because I really, really love the video game.
Yeah. My second honorable mention, or my number one honorable mention, is if I've backed their games before. Not so much the publisher, but like the games. For example, Tiny Epic. As soon as they come out with a new one, which they do every like few months or so, I'm backing it. It doesn't matter. Like I have that in my budget because I know how much I've enjoyed their games, even if they've been a miss. Okay, that's fine. I already have this combination. Or if I own the game and they do a Kickstarter for expansion stuff, yeah, I'm in. Already because I already know that I like it and I know that it's something that I've been done. That's my second or first honorable mention is if I've backed the games before. Now there is of course exceptions to that. I have where they've came out with like expansion content and all this other stuff and exclusives that I was like, okay, the game was okay.
Yeah. So my last one, because I did add a third one on here, is for honorable mention is the style of game. People talk about the mechanisms, how does it play, stuff like that. Yeah, so if it's a worker placement, I'm going to be intrigued. Is it a deduction game? Not so much.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
That's a main one for me. Well, honorable mention wise.
Yeah.
There's always an exception to the rule. I have a social deduction game over here that I backed right away, and that's Murder in Hong Kong.
And that's from a company that you've had trouble with their communication too.
Here's the thing about that. So this is just recently that I've had communication problems with them. So I've backed 3 games in them that I can think of off the top of my head. I backed Deception, didn't have communication problems. I backed Champions of Midgards with the expansions and the full game, didn't have communication problems. And then I backed Reavers of Midgards, and there was issues. And I have another game that I'm backed with them, and they learned from Reavers of Midgard, and their communication is on
point. Good.
On point, yeah. So it's been real good. So Tsukiyumi Full Moon Down is the other one I'm on that I'm waiting to get back. I already paid for it. It's already paid for and stuff like that.
Cool. Awesome. So I'll go ahead and go first because you have backed more board games than I. So my number 3, the third most important reason for me backing Kickstarter, if it's a Kickstarter from someone I know or a friend, hands down. If it's a friend of mine who's running a Kickstarter, they're like, "Hey, Danny, I need your help." Okay, I'm in. I'm going to help you.
And a big part of it too is that
even if I like the game or not.
board game designers.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you go to like Gamma and stuff like that.
Exactly. Like, so for example, like I know the guys from Level 99. They're really great people. I haven't backed all of their games. In fact, quite a few I haven't backed. But this new one is from Ithri, the new designer, and he's a friend of mine, and he's always supported my games in the back, and he's always play tested and given me honest feedback. So now that this is his first game himself that's going to Kickstarter through Level 99, yes, absolutely, I'm on board. Even if I didn't like it, I probably would still back it. Because I've done that before. I know
nothing about the game. I haven't play tested it like you have. But because Ithri's been very supportive of our podcast as well in adding, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll back it. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it looks good. I've looked at the video, I've watched how it plays, and I'm like, yeah, I'm probably going to like this game. So
Exactly. I have a good friend in Tucson, and she's a game designer, and I was one of the backers. It was unfortunately unsuccessful, but it was the same thing as one of my Kickstarters. We knew that the goal was just way too high. If she, as soon as she does a new Kickstarter, if she does, then I'll be backer number 1, absolutely, because whether I like the game or not, I want to support. So that's my first reason, or number 3 reason. If they're a friend of someone I know, or if they're a friend of mine, then I will back their project.
So my number 3 reason was discussed in the thing, and that's what I said. We'll get back to it, and that's theme. Theme is very important for me, even if it's just kind of painted on. Is it a Western? I'm probably going to back it because I like Westerns. Is it Vikings? I'm probably going to back it because I like Vikings. Speaking of Reavers and Champions of Midgard, those are Viking-based games with worker placement mechanisms. So I enjoy that. So theme is very, very important to me. The one Stefan Feld game that I backed, Merlin, I was going to back it regardless because I love the King Arthurian mythology and stuff like that. I really, really enjoy that kind of stuff. So it's important for me to have a decent theme that's going to... So if it's like, say, we just recently had a game on sale on Miniature Market, Predaporter. It's the fashion design game.
Oh, yeah.
It's unique, but I don't know if I would back something like that because it's just not something I'm really interested in. Like, look how I dress. Do you think I really care about fashion?
Right. It's a topic that's hard for you to get into if it's just not. I
heard it's a really good game. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not something for me to get into.
Right.
Like I've been playing through a game that you gave me that's back from the '60s, Solar Ball.
Yeah.
And if it's got a baseball theme, that's going to intrigue me. I'm going to look at it. I almost backed Football Highlights 20-something and Baseball Highlights.
Yeah.
I haven't got them yet, but it's something that intrigues me is sports games.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is actually very similar to my number 2. Not quite, but I put a combination of like topics. So if you have a theme and mechanisms that I like the best example of this, I backed Tricerion by Mind Gap Games. I forget what the publisher is, but Tricerion, I love magic. I love magicians. I was one myself.
Sure you clarify, not Magic the card game.
No,
magicians.
Well, I like that too, but the thing is, I was a magician for many years. In fact, I have a deck of cards almost always near me. So that goes to show you, I was doing magic lessons. So when they came out with a magic themed game, and it's like, oh well, this is kind of a heavy Euro worker placement. Each worker has a different strength and abilities, and you're building these illusions. Like, sorry, I'm in. Like, you had me at like an hour ago before I even knew about it, you know. And then so like there are other games that they've came out with. Anachrony, I think is no, not Anachrony. It might be Anachrony, the time travel one. That,
yeah.
Where basically their time travel is a loan system, but it's also worker placement. That's really intriguing to me. I didn't back it because I don't like time travel that much, but I definitely would have if that was the case. If the Back to the Future board game was coming to Kickstarter, hands down, I'd back it.
Yeah, because Back to the Future.
Right, exactly. And then, but it's also mechanisms that I like. I've bought plenty of Magic-themed board games that were terrible, and I've been hugely disappointed in. That was the first one where I was kind of like, wow, this is really something. This is a meaty game. I like it. So it has to be a combination of topics and themes that I like and mechanisms that I've already enjoyed so far.
All right, so my number 2 is a biggie for me, and that is designer. It's gotta, if it's someone I know, in like I said, Stefan Feld or Bruno Cathala, if that's coming to a Kickstarter game, Isaac Childress. If it's a designer I know, it's gonna intrigue me, and I more than likely will back it. And it's just because I know I like the way that designer, Phil Walker Harding. Let's just throw him out there too. If that board, if he does a Kickstarter, I'm probably going to be very interested in it, and I more than likely will back it because I like that designer. Yep. These are people I attach to. These are games that I know I like. And so that's a big proponent. Yeah, I back games that I don't know the designer in, and that's fine. Ship Phillips is another one. I back a lot of his games. The only reason I didn't back his most recent one was because it happened during the same time as Frosthaven.
Yeah.
So.
Which is a good reason. So, like, yeah. I remember... You like history more than I do. I do like early civilization theme, but like when we were doing our board game breakdown and we saw Stefan Feld's Bonfire that neither of us have heard, I know what happened in the back of both of our minds. We thought, oh, Bonfire, that's a semi-interesting theme, but what can Feld do with it? Let's talk about this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a good point. Is if it's from a designer or a publisher.
Look at Prospero Hall. Disney's Jungle Cruise is not something I think I would enjoy. I haven't been to Disneyland in 30 years. I haven't been on many of the rides, and this is basically based off a Disneyland or Disney World ride.
Yeah.
And yet, I want the game. One, I've seen it, watch it played, and two, it's Prospero Hall. So I'm at the point where I pick up Prospero Hall games because I know I'll like them. I just picked up The Shining on your recommendation.
Yep. Yeah.
So...
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point.
The designer is and that's the thing with, like, come on, a lot of their stuff is Eric Lane. I like Eric Lane games, so I'm gonna probably back a lot of his Kickstarters. Again, the only reason I'm only $1 in Onk is because it was during the same time as Frosthaven.
Right.
There's no way I could spend like $300 on 2 board games. The wife would kill me.
That's a good reason. My number one reason for backing a Kickstarter, I feel, thrives with Kickstarter, and it's something that couldn't happen without Kickstarter, and that's originality. A new concept or a theme that is not of the norm. I'll put there's a game, it's controversial and I get why it is, and it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, but it was a small Kickstarter called Divorce Simulator. Now I got a chance to play it, and I thought that's it's a very tongue-in-cheek, it's not serious.
It's not a bad game at all.
It's a silly theme, and that's something that I haven't seen. The first thing that came to mind, and it's a project that I wish I backed.
Before you go into this, tell him about the one time you showed it to one of our friends, and he's like, no.
Oh yeah, no, that I can name 3 people of my friends, I'm not going to here, that immediately said, I've experienced this in real life. Nope, I don't need the game. And I get that. That's totally something and if that game came out from, like, I mean, Game Right, I don't know, it wouldn't. But let's say it came out from an established publisher, there's no way it would hit the market. It doesn't have zombies, it doesn't have Egyptian theme, it doesn't have, like, a tried and true theme. There's no way they would bring it to market. And rightfully so, because it's not going to fare well. but that's why Kickstarter is so good at that. The first game that came to mind for Kickstarters, and it's one that I wish I had backed. It's just I couldn't afford it. And I don't even remember the name of the game, but it came in a box about yay big, and there was a bunch of 3D pieces of like soda bottles and groceries, and you're packing like a grocery cart, and it was like a series of Asian games, and that was one of the games where the pieces were just so interesting. It was like a set collection game. I think another one had like a vending machine theme, you know. If the more original and the more out of the box and crazy the theme is, probably the more likely I'll back it, because I appreciate the fact that they are trying to do something that is not tried and true, something that might not even fund based on the theme, something that would never come to market in any other way. I think Wombat Rescue was I think that was a Kickstarter. I might be wrong, but that has a theme that I can use as an example. It's about wombats leaving poop cubes around this area, and you're trying to find paths because wombats mostly have really bad eyesight, and that's actually based off of like how they work. They poop cubes, which is ridiculous in real life. And so this designer said, "Oh well, if I made a game about pooping cubes and route building, you know, that would never work outside of that." But it did in Kickstarter. so it needs originality.
That's a good one. That's interesting. I can see the originality. A big part of it too is talking about like Gloomhaven behind you. That's original into an extent. Yeah, it's generic fantasy, but what he did for the generic fantasy part of it, he created a whole new world and lore and stuff like that. So you don't have your orcs, you have a brute who is an Inox. He created this whole new world and creatures and stuff like that, and that's what intrigued me about Gloomhaven. When people are saying it's not it's fantasy, but it's not the fantasy that you know. You're not going to have your elves, you're not going to have your stuff on there like that you're used to, the giants and stuff like that. They have their own thing. Like you have an elemental, but the way they do use the elements is different. They're called I forget what they're called. You don't have it on your picture. Mine, we have the same site up, so but it's on there. It's so there's a character in the starting thing that's a Cragheart. He's part of that family but his heart got broken out, and you do fight them in the game, so I'm not giving you a spoiler alert. There are these elementals in the way they play. It's so unique.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why I appreciate it when a designer or a new company is willing to take Smirk and Dagger, perfect example. Their game Cinder, it's about dragons dating. And you have like an app. It's like,
oh my god, that name! It just got in my head.
I love it.
I know what it's based off. Oh god,
yes,
no,
that is such a bizarre theme. I absolutely adore the fact that Kurt did that. The owner of Smirk and Dagger. That it's such a unique theme. Run for your life, Gingerbread or Gingerbread Man. That's a game about tearing off limbs of gingerbread cookies. It's so ridiculous. But that's why I appreciate when people do Kickstarters that are just over the top and it wouldn't be funded otherwise. So.
Well, and for me, like Everdell, it's a worker placement game, one that I backed, and it's been on Kickstarter several times. But it's not really a unique thing, but you don't really see it a lot. I think you have it in like Rise of Everdell and stuff like that, where it's anamorphic, can never say that word.
Yeah, like Root, personified animals or.
Yeah. Where they have human characteristics, but they're animals and living in a community and building a community.
Yeah.
That's not something that I think a lot of people would get into, but I like it. It's interesting to me, that sort of stuff. And to me, it makes it kid-friendly.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and then there's one of the bigger Kickstarters that we were talking about, Kingdom Death Monster. Not something I'm into, but it is a unique theme.
Yeah, it's definitely not a common theme for sure. I'm looking around my room trying to find other Kickstarters I've done, but yeah, I mean that you get the idea. Is I appreciate it, and Kickstarters mostly have the ability to be original, whereas I still like it when any company comes out with something completely over the top. You know, I will most likely buy it anyway.
That's the main reason why I back a lot of like Academy games, is because they take something that's historical and make it a fun game. You can see one right here on my shelf. Freedom. that's a rough game. It's sad because it talks about the Underground Railroad and the slavery problem that America had back in the 1800s and stuff like that, and
Right.
well beyond before that. But yeah, and it's talking about that aspect again. We talked about another one that they did about the space race.
Yep.
They've done like war simulation with 1776 and the War of 1812 and Vikings and stuff like that. I don't really play those games just because of the battle mechanisms in them, and I'm not a big fan of that kind of style game. But I'm intrigued by it when it comes to those kind of topics because it's so different.
Right.
You don't see a lot of these games based on history. So yeah, that was a good pick.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So my number one is not as cool as your number one.
Well,
and that is
rarely can yours be. No, I'm just kidding. But this is your reason.
This is the first time you were right, Danny. And that is,
I finally got it. Years of effort, finally got it.
So this goes again with one of my honorable mentions, success of past Kickstarters, and that's the company. If it's a company that I know, and it goes like what you were talking about in one of your honorable mentions, if I back something from them before, it's going to make it more likely for me to back with them again because of their track record with me personally. So, like I mentioned before, I backed both Gloomhaven and Frosthaven. Isaac Childress, I did back Founders of Gloomhaven, but that game didn't even look like something I wanted to play. And it's because, but if he comes up with another game that's not even the Gloomhaven or the Frosthaven line and not as complicated as, say, Founders of Gloomhaven, I may pick it up.
Gotcha.
And I may back it because Isaac Childress' company, Seal of Fair Games, has me intrigued. Again, I've backed 4 Gray Fox game Kickstarters. I haven't backed them all, but I backed 4, and that was, and I know for a fact that I'm going to back one more for sure, and that's the 3rd game of the Midgard series.
Oh yeah, yep.
Because it's interesting how they're doing the Midgard series. Their first game was the Eurotrash, the hybrid, the theme with worker placement mechanics. The Reavers of Midgard is their straight up Euro style of that game. But their next game in the Midgard series is supposed to be their straight up Ameritrash, Eldritch Horror kind of like game where it's just all theme and American style, not so much Euro mechanics in it. So I'm gonna back it just because I want the whole trilogy. In your case, Gameland Games is something that you will probably back. Queen Games is another one I'll probably back. And the company's track record, come on, is a big one. Like I said, the only reason I didn't get into Ankh is because I'm already on Frosthaven. They came around the same time. Thunderworks game. This is a big case in point for me. Role Player is one of my favorite games, and I just backed their Kickstarter for their thing. But Walk Up is in the Thunderworks game, but not by Keith Macheka. I can't pronounce his last name. But it's made by another designer, but it's in that Lock-Up world and published by Thunderworks Game. Another reason why I'll back his games. Cartographers wasn't Kickstarter, but I did pick up that game. That's a big proponent for me. Ravensburger is another one. If they did a Kickstarter, I'd probably look into getting their games. So company is very important for that reason. Well, there's one right behind you. I can't think of the Mysterium. If that company, Libelud, does a Kickstarter, I'll probably back it just because I'm familiar with the company. I like their style of games.
That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. So I think those are pretty all fair reasons from both of our ends, in all honesty. I mean, they go into a lot of what our viewers were saying as well. There's a lot of backwards reputation that's involved in this. And I think if nothing else, if you do your research, you should be safe with Kickstarters. Obviously, don't spend money you don't have.
With like my stuff and what everybody is saying, is because of the fear of what can happen in Kickstarter. That's why people go for like these more established stuff. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's they're worried about the fact that the Kickstarters might not happen, but thankfully we live in such a great community for board gamers that it's not a guarantee, but some people might take that extra mile and really help them out, and that's why it's like, even though I don't generally like the games that Jasco makes, I respect their reputation, and if they made a game that interests me in the theme, I know that they're solid and I know there's something I can rely on. So that goes to show a little step is a whole mile as far as as far as getting your games backed. So, do you have any other ending points before we send it out?
Not really, other than that if you want to watch the video of this later on, you can find us on YouTube at Everyday Board Games 2020. You can also find us on Podbean. The audio version of this will go up on there at Everyday Board Games on Podbean.
Podbean. Okay. Also, if you want to watch us ever record this live and join in on the discussion, we record this at about noon Mountain Daylight Savings Time for New Mexico. That's where we are both located. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Each one with a different topic.
The Denver time zone, whatever the Denver time zone is when we record it, which is noon our time.
Yep. And so on Mondays we record our board game breakdown. Wednesdays we record Chits and Giggles, where we have our discussion point, and Fridays we do our top 8 debate.
And so, just for everybody who's listening or at here live, so that's our recording track record. The way we release them through YouTube and Podbean is that since top 8 debate was our first, they're always going to be released first. So Monday, the top 8 debates will be released. Wednesdays will be Chits and Giggles still, and then Fridays will become the board game breakdown podcast version.
Awesome. And I think that's about it. Thank you for joining us today for this awesome discussion, and thanks for everybody who commented during the discussion as well as on Facebook. That led to some fantastic discussion points, and we're glad you all gave your input. Yeah. With that being said, I've been Daniel.
And Daniel.
And thank you for joining us on the Everyday Board Game Podcast.
Have a good one.